lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and with me today, I have a really awesome guest. I got Kyle Starks. We're going to talk some comics, some of his past stuff. Going to jump into his latest book, I Hate This Place, which I really dig. Welcome to the show, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. We're excited to be here.
Oh yeah, dude, my pleasure. So I always like to ask, when I have somebody new on that I haven't talked to before, kind of like,
As you can see, I'm in a very exciting unfinished basement. That's where my office is. It's very glamorous. People are like, "What's it like being a professional comic creator?" And you're like, "Obviously, it's so much money and it's so much glamour, and you might be in an unfinished basement for most of your days." But luckily, I have a window. I have one window that someone could break into. It's very small.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Do you want to keep going? You may just act like
I mean, the internet jumped for a second, but the question I asked before I froze was kind of like your backstory. Like, how did you get into comics as a fan?
Yeah, so how did I start loving them comic book boys is the question. So I don't actually know the answer to this. I have a suspicion based on past. So my uncle's name is Tony Starks, ha ha ha, and he has always had this side hustle where he did Silver Age and Golden Age comics, and so he's always been a comic guy, and I'm sure that had some influence on it because my parents are not that at all, right? So as long as I can remember, for the most part, me and my brother had a pull list, and so I've just always been, and I had the worst. I love to say, because it's amazing that I like comics at all, because during that period I had the most vanilla comic pull, and I'm 46, so we're talking 40 years ago, 35 years ago. And it was Spider-Man, Hulk, Justice League, X-Men. And at that time, it was when the Hulk was in the cross dimension, the crossroads, which is cannot be interesting to a child. And it wasn't. And Spider-Man was written where he was beating up Firelord. It was just very not interesting. And Justice League was Justice League Detroit. And X-Men was I was a full-on X-Men guy because X-Men was great then. But why do I like comics? I really kind of read the worst eras. And we love comics. Me and my brother loved comics. And when we both turned 14, we started working at the local comic shop, which also was a video rental store, a used bookstore, a used music store, baseball cards, pornography. It had everything. So we were I was inundated with all media and all pop culture, and I love it. I live for it. And then when I was 18, 19, the mid 90s is the worst time for comics. So it's kind of amazing. I've survived being a comic fan. If you look at where I started and sort of when I would have been the most influential. And I did the 90s comics, they're so grim dark, and everything wanted to be the baddest version of Watchmen. Not that there wasn't some complete gems in there, but yeah, I've always done it. I think it's probably I don't know how he could have influenced my parents. Maybe they just we read them and they're if they read them, we're going to keep getting them. But yeah, that's how I started. That's how I started reading them comic books. Just always have. Love the comic books.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's funny that you worked in a shop that sold that kind of stuff, because you definitely have that vibe of the 80s, 90s action movie type stuff in there, plus your signature humor that you have in most of your books as well.
Yeah, the action movie thing that's 100% my father's fault, because he loved watching action movies, and he didn't care if there was a child in the room. So I watched so many, the VHS was, the VCR was always running with something terrible that I probably shouldn't have seen. A lot of bad paper mache heads blowing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's 100% my dad. I love action movies. But yeah, really the great thing about that shop, and it's there's no question that's why I'm the way I am. It's because we had the best classic film collection, and we had a guy who loved classic films who worked there, and he'd be "Oh, you should check this out." So it's man, I love the Marx Brothers. I adore the Marx Brothers. If we saw a book come in that looked interesting, I could just take it. If there's an album we could just take it. So it's I had access to everything. Every night back in those days, we're bagging on Tuesdays, and you'd read everything. And if you didn't read something, one of the other guys read it. So it's just a different time. It's just consuming so many things, but for sure that. But the action movies is my dad's fault. It's 100% my dad's fault.
Yeah, I think that's one of the joys of working at comic store, because I work at one too. So to be able to kind of read whatever you want is definitely a plus.
I think it's great. It's great that there's so many options, but I feel man, it's too bad that because there's not too many, but there kind of are. One person cannot read every comic that comes out on a Tuesday, but it used to be back in those days, because there was there were not there was a limit. There just wasn't all the indie publishers and the smallest publishers. It's like if someone bought something like say we'll say X-Men still, which I probably was in '95. But we were leaning, like we are starting to like Bones coming out, and we're really getting into Eight Ball and Hate and all this sort. If someone got something that I liked, I'd be like, hey man, you know what? I just read this book last night. Like you should check out this book because it's dope. Like I like it, you'll like it. And there's a lot more of that. There's a lot more of people wanting. It was less like even trying to move product and more like it's such a community based on we're trying to look out for each other and we want everyone to read the best possible thing. And you could tell by what someone bought, like what it was like. Oh, if you like what I like, you'll like this other thing.
Right.
And it was just like a cool like it was a much smaller community, obviously. Again, what 20 years ago. It's too bad it's not the same because it should be like it would be great if every week you could go, oh my God, I read this thing I never would have read, but it's part of my job and you'll like it. Like if you like Saga, you'll like X or whatever, right?
Right.
I think there's a lot of really good books that were underseen that if they're 20 years ago, people would be like, you got to read Kaiju Max. Like why aren't you reading Kaiju Max? Because everyone would have read it because it's Tuesday night or Headlopper or like there's a million things that should have been huge and just weren't because there's just so much stuff out there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you just look at like, they say like there's a comic book for everybody. There really is a comic book for everybody now. It's like it's so much, and there's so much shelf space and stuff. Like there's so many new series launching constantly that I think it is the job of the comic book retailer, to kind of steer people towards that. That's what I like. Like that's why I started the channel. That's what I love doing the most at the shop. I mean, I only work there. I'm only there like one day a week. But I work Wednesdays. Like that's the day to work.
That's the day to work, right? Yeah.
So, like that's the joy of it. Like like you said, you watch what somebody buys and you're like, oh, you got to check this out. Like
I would love it.
Yeah.
That's it, because like and the thing is with this, this is so far away probably from what your intention was, but the thing with this industry is like retailers. I mean, it's because you can only go one place to get a monthly comic, right? There's only one place you can go, and retailers are the ones who sell our books. So for there being so many, like there's so many things that just like there's not time for a retailer. Like it sucks. Yeah, like it's huge. Like that's the best thing you can hear. That's what we love to hear is we need retailers to sell our books, but there's so many. Like you wish someone had time for everything. So that's what the hustle. That's where I'm at now. It's like I'm just trying to be like, can I be one of the guys that you guys make time for to read on Tuesday nights, to see if I'm good enough to sell on Wednesdays. And like I hope I am. I think I am. But that's the hustle. Like that's the hardest part. There's only one place to buy it. There's only one place to buy it, and like that's who has to sell it. And I think there's like 2,100 stores now in America, something like that.
Yeah.
Like man, and some of those are guys that only care about Pokemon cards. You know what I mean? Like some of them only care about Magic and Pokemon cards. So it's like I'm not doing any good there. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, but I mean, I think like what you're doing, like even just something you're doing right now, I think that if more creators were willing to get out there and like, talk to as many podcasts, as many blogs as they can, I think, like you never know, even if it's one reader, right?
Yeah.
That one reader could then snowfall into something else, snowball into something else and continue to get people reading, which is, why I always start by saying like how much I appreciate you guys talking to me. Cause like, I know I'm not like, I'm not like at the top of like the promotion, because like I have my viewers, but like that's I think and I'm not trying to like say anything against creators that won't like come on my show, but like I feel like this is the way to sell books because like you said, it's retailers and promotion, right?
For sure, so. And it's the way you can promote are so small. It's really sites and podcasts. I'll talk all day long. I'll talk to whomever. Because if I come on here and hopefully, one, not everyone's suited. I mean, not everyone who's a comic creator is suited to do this, right? It's not their strength, and maybe they feel that like they come off in a bad light, and I get that. It's like I love talking. I can do it all day. I think I'm moderately interesting and charming. I hope so. I can do it all day, and I love to do it because just as you said, like honestly, if I can get 5 people today to buy any one of my books and they like it, and then they buy one of my other books and they like it, and then that's the whole thing. Like I think for my book Old Head, which was a book I put out last year, which is a like sort of an action comedy horror book. I think when they were like, we're going to print 4,000 copies of it, right? And like to me, I'm like, that's such a small number, and it is. It really is a small number, and you think, well, that's your legacy. So if I can get 5 people to buy Old Head, that's great. Like for me, it's great because I want all 4,000 of those copies gone. I want them to be read and consumed. That's why I made it. All of this I made to be read and consumed and enjoyed. So So yeah, I mean that's the deal. You got to come out. You got to hit the streets. You got to go to conventions. Um, whether you like it or not, like as long as you're scheduled, like that's part of the job. Part of the job is like, and there's either the thing is like Twitter. Everyone's like, oh, you got to go on Twitter. That's all. It's the same people. You know what I mean? Like that's a it's a what do they call it? It's like an echo tube or whatever.
Hmm.
We're just like it's the same people here in the same. They're already buying it. They're already buying my stuff. I don't need those. I need new people, because they probably haven't heard of me. Because again, there's too many books on the shelves, and unless the retailer loved action comedy for the past 5 years, and that's a comedy doesn't sell great, and it's sort of why I'm kind of moving away from it and kind of not at all because I can't help myself. Is like yeah, so it's like they're not gonna. If you always read bad comedy, you're not going to be like, oh, let me check out this new one. And like, that's fair. Like, I get it. I think some people do it really well. And I'm trying to make sure, like, like Mark Russell or Chip Zdarsky or Ryan Brown and Charles Soule, that people go, oh, it's always good. Like, it's always good. Check it out. Because I think it's true. I think it's a very small group. So yeah, there's all these variables. Like, exactly. Like, I'll talk to anyone, man. I'll talk to anyone because if I can get 5 people who've never heard of me, who are
Yeah.
moderately interested, like, oh, he seemed smart and interesting and that book sounded like a good idea, then I'm doing my job and you're doing your job even more, right?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel that that's getting to hear it directly from the creator's mouth definitely always like helps sell it. Because I've had people tell me like, oh man, I watched this. Like you getting excited about this book made me want to buy it, So, and I think it goes the same way. Like when the creator gets to explain or you get to kind of feel like the person more behind the book,
Yeah.
it kind of makes you want to check it out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of truth to that. If someone's weird and hateful and clearly not enjoying whatever, like I'll talk about comics. I'll talk about making comics all day because I love it. But I the truth, the fact, the way if you're selling something creative, art, music, TV, fiction, there's two ways to be successful. One, you make a work of unarguable genius. It's so brilliant, it's not debatable. That doesn't happen. Like that's once in a blue million. Or somebody says to someone else, "Hey, this is good," because that's what works. So that's what the thing is. Like people talking about things more than me talking about it, like that's the validation. This album's good, and if I can get 100 people to say it to 100 people, I'm going to sell 50 books. You know what I mean? And if it's
Yeah.
good, they're going to tell 50 people. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So like that's how it is. So having people for sure, you being excited about a book, to the people who like to watch you is going to do more than me saying it. But if I was like, I just watch this, I'm starting to watch these Stone Cold Steve Austin interviews because I've run out of stuff. And he just in the second episode he talks to Goldberg, who clearly just like doesn't like any of this. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
he seems like he's inconvenienced to be there, and it's like, come on, man. Like this is not great. Like be like, what are you doing? Like I know it's like you're like sitting with him, but it's like he does not seem like he wants to talk about it. He doesn't. Maybe he does. It's just how he comes across. So it's like I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. I'm stoked. I'm stoked about my books. I'm stoked to be so lucky, despite obviously working in an unfinished basement, to even be working. So it's like I get to tell stories once a month, and I'm blessed enough that people buy them, and I'm gonna keep trying to make better stories for them.
Yeah, dude. No, I
Anyway, that's
mean,
my shtick.
yeah, dude. No, I mean, like I said, I really dig your stuff. The stuff that I haven't read everything, but from what I've read, I've really like I really enjoy it. You got your start self like you were doing your own indie stuff, but then you kind of veer into like the licensed properties. So how did that like come about, and how does writing for yourself kind of differ when you're writing for something where you have somebody telling you
Yeah,
like
sure. So when I had my kids, usually they can hear me. They're not here because it's 10:30 in the morning. They're like, he's telling his story again. When I started having kids, I realized like my first kid, I was like, I'm never gonna have time to myself again. And I kind of made a list of things that I never did. I loved comics, as I said earlier in the 90s. I went to school to be a fine artist. I got out of it. I just drank a lot and tried to score constantly. Like that's all I did for many years. And then we got married. I started getting grown-up jobs. And anyway, I was like, here's a list of things I won't have time for once the second kid comes along. And one of them was finish a comic. And I did this comic called Legend of Ricky Thunder. It's 180 pages. That's not how you do it. It's super dumb. But I fell in love with the process of making comics and telling stories in that media because it's like, oh, I love comics. Like I remember, it's just like I remember the sort of language of it, and like I think I could do things a little bit different. But I just gonna make it for myself. Like I'm just gonna make these things for myself. And somehow I got like discovered. Like it got discovered through a website that doesn't exist anymore. And they were like, "Oh, you should go to conventions. Like conventions are great. You'll meet people." And I'm like, "I guess so. That's what I'm supposed to do." So I started going to conventions. I love doing it. My second book was Sex Castle, which I self-published. at one of these shows I was going to just for funsies. I was like, what a great hobby I have. It makes money. I'm working this regular full-time job. And at one of the shows, like I ended up this weird, sort of weird, convoluted situation. I ended up having dinner with Fraction and Chip Zdarsky because of these other people.
Wow.
And they're like, "Oh, show me your book." And I gave Matt my book, which is a whole bigger story. His plane didn't take off in time, so he read it, sort of live tweeted it, and sold like 50. But like people are buying it from me off my site. I'm like, "This is dope, right?" I'm so excited. I'm selling like 50 books. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to talk to Image?" I was like, "Yeah." And Image is like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "Well, I want more people to read Sex Castle." So Sex Castle was optioned before it came out, and it was nominated for Best Humor Publication. And if you make something, this is circular to me saying comedy is a bad word, but if you make something funny that people are like, that's actually funny, everyone who has a funny book comes to you. So Oni came to me and they at a show I was in Portland, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to do Invader Zim?" I'm 46. That window was when I was literally like dealing drugs in college at art school, right? Like I was not watching Nickelodeon. It was SpongeBob and Invader Zim. I'm not watching it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it. Like I know a little bit about it, but it's like I don't know. I've never seen it. And they're like, "Oh, that's what they want. They want fresh eyes." So on that flight home, I watched all of Invader Zim in an airport because I had like a 12-hour layover or something insane. Um, I watched all the Invader Zims, and I'm like, I can do this. I wrote one issue. They did not want fresh eyes. That's absolutely not what they wanted, which is fine because I'm just not in that market. And I told my wife, I was like, man, I wish instead of they asked me to do Rick and Morty because I love Dan Harmon's work on Community and the Ben Stiller. Like I think Dan Harmon, for all of them, everyone involved, their human failures, I think like is a really brilliant creative mind. And they did like a week later, like somehow I willed it in. They're like, "Hey, do you want to do 5 issues of Rick and Morty?" And I like I liked it a lot. I think it's what everyone thinks. It's one of those things that was legitimately worth all the hype it got. And Rick and Morty, not just because I like it, but because like my whole thing was like sort of taking sci-fi tropes or action tropes, doing like action movie tropes and adding sort of all these degrees of like high humor, low humor, niche humor, and doing this thing where you're just playing with action tropes and the characters are likable. But more so is like they were always like Sex Castle is very much about like parental responsibility and how our decisions affect us and how our parents' decisions affect us. So it's more than just this dumb action movie. And so I mean, Rick and Morty is the same way. It's like it deals with family, and if you read much of my books, they're about family. Like that's my probably number one sort of subtext. So they did. They're like, "Do you want to do 5 issues?" I was like, "I'd love to." Long story short, I ended up doing like 48 of them. For several years, I had more issues of the comic than there were episodes of the show. So I was the most prolific Rick and Morty creator on the planet. So that's how that happened. And that's kind of the only like thing. I did Mars Attacks later, and Mars Attacks again. It's funny and it's sci-fi. So and Rick and Morty selling, which doesn't hurt for people wanting me to do things. And I don't. I saw the movie. I like Tim Burton fine. Like I was like, if I get an idea, I'll do it. And I kind of got an idea, and so I was like, I'll do this. If you let me do this, and Chris Schweitzer, who's my best friend who colors, he's like, I'll draw all that, and I'm like, that's not how it works. And like, oh, we want him to draw it. I'm like, okay. So like that's kind of like if you do one thing, you sort of get another opportunity. So I mean, I said no to a lot of licensed things because they weren't things I liked or cared about, or I didn't have a good idea for. But I love Rick and Morty. I love the show. I really think it's especially those first two seasons. I think they're brilliant. I think they're bulletproof. It does so much. So it was cool. So the biggest difference for me, especially for the license stuff, is that we're making sausage in many ways. So like I did a book after Sex Castle called Rock Candy Mountain, also Eisner nominated for Best Humor Publication, one of my best books. And I think in issue one, I mean, I know in issue one, there's like a 16 or a 24 panel page because I ran out of space. For me, I'm like, this action has to happen, and this fight can happen in one page. I would never, ever write that for someone else. I would never make. I think we looked at Old Head. I reference Old Head because it's recent. I think I averaged like 7 or 8 panels a page, like 7.5, something like that. Like there's a lot of panels when I write for Direct Market, when I write for Rick and Morty, or when even I Hate This Place, Peacemaker, which comes out May 1st. Get your pre-orders in now. I rarely go over 6 panels. And that's because we're all working. Like we're all like we don't own it. You know what I mean? So that's one thing is like I try not to put more work unless it needs it, unless the story demands it. I try not to put more work in those things than I do in my own work because I can suffer all I want. And Schweitzer for Mars Attacks and Schweitzer for Six Sidekick, he's the same. Like he would add panels, which is what I would do. He's like, "Oh, this should be a 3-panel thing," and I'm like, "It should be, but I'm not going to write that because you know we're all just trying to get a book out on time.
Hmm.
So that's the biggest difference. The other big difference, and I say this, and people like, it's not a lesson. Do not take this as good advice. I don't use a script for my work. If I'm writing and drawing it, I don't use a script. I think about it. I think about it over and over for forever, and I'm editing in my head until the story I'm happy with, and then I can go at it. And that's kind of even how I write everything else. But then I have to transcribe like these sort of mad ideas. But one of my friends once said like my comics are sort of like planned improv, which is kind of true. I like to leave space just for, I feel like action. I want to be in the moment when I'm right, because I do full choreography, which not a lot of people do. Because I think fights should tell stories.
Hmm.
Because of that, I want to like, I know what beats are, but I want to feel this action when I do it. And comedy is the same. I know the part where it's like this should be a joke, and then I want to make myself laugh. I'm not planning that stuff. Some of it is. Some of it is like this is the joke because the joke means something. And sort of everything means something. That's sort of the problem with me as a crazy person, is like nothing's accidental. So even that bit has to set up something. Either it's a character thing, or it's a callback, or it's going to set up a callback. Or so yeah, I don't use scripts for me. I don't write them out. I will occasionally like write out a monologue if I can't quite get it in my head when I'm doing it. So yeah, I don't use scripts for me because I don't want to do things twice. I just don't want to do things twice.
Yeah.
And I write scripts for everyone else, obviously, and I try to keep it lighter work than I would give myself.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. That was going to be my next question. You answered it already. So I was just curious, like in terms of like, the humor and the jokes, do you ever like run it by somebody first to see if they, or do you just like as you're doing it, if it makes you laugh, you got it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let me preface it. I'll answer. If it makes me laugh, I know it's good. All right, I hope it's good. But I preface this. I think one of the things, and maybe this is good advice. The thing is that a lot of direct market, especially big two comedy stuff, they don't understand. Like comedy is hard in comics because it's pacing. Like you have to give yourself space for it, and you have to sort of plan for everything in a way. The thing is, a lot of big two stuff like doesn't understand comedy is subjective, and different people like different things. So for my stuff, I try to put a gamut of this. Is again, I think why Rick and Morty was so successful, because they do the same thing. You want highbrow, you want fart jokes. You know what I mean? You want a literary reference. You want to do some stuff in between. Big two stuff loves visual gags, and it's like visual, like that's they feel like you're reading like Mad Magazine. It's like I guess it's funny, but it's not like ha ha funny. So I try to put all these things in. And I like almost every type of comedy. I love it. So
Mhm.
if it's a comedy movie, I watch it. If it's an action movie, I watch it. I can't help myself, and I've watched a lot of bad ones of both of them. Action movie bad ones are still great. Bad comedies are bad. They're bad, but yeah. So I think the secret is for comedy and comics is one pacing. Pacing's so important. The panel sizes are beats, but also you want to do like a gamut of different genres of comedy in your book. That way, if someone doesn't like spit takes and fart jokes and dick jokes, there's still stuff in there. They're like, "Oh, that character is funny." You know what I mean?
Mhm.
All that stuff is like, if it amuses me, I'm not like, do you think this? I mean, maybe I have. I'm not gonna say I never have, but in general, like I'm in the moment. I try to for those bits. Like I know conceptually what should be funny. This character and how they act will be funny, and will give me like 1,000 opportunities to do something funny, and so on and so forth. But otherwise, I try to let everything happen like that. Like I go into almost everything with just beats, and like these are the plot points, these are the outline points I have to hit, and then there's the space in between, and the space in between causes the most problems for sure.
Yeah.
Because there's also like logistical elements and that's my least favorite part of writing is, so and so has to go someplace. How do they get there? Why are they going there? Like it does that part when I'm telling it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they get there or why they're going there. Maybe matters sometimes, but it's like we go. I guess we'll take a car to go to the grocery store. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I hate it so much. All those sort of little like minor logistical things that you have to figure out are the hardest part for sure.
In terms of like comedy, because I'm kind of curious, like, are there certain comedy directors or comedians that kind of influence your work, or that style of comedy that influences you?
I don't think I can be like this person like singularly, and that's a good question that I'd probably need more time to think about. Like I said, like I really fell in love when I was early 20s with like old black and white comedy, Laurel and Hardy, the Marx Brothers, W.C. Fields, like, and I think the thing is like there's a real sort of vaudeville element to those guys that's kind of timeless. pretty much I'm trying to think like I'm like who is the guy like there's a lot of cerebral stuff by people who are also like the Rick and Morty guys, sort of dead to the world, that I really liked until they started being awful humans. There's a lot of like things like the Fairley Brothers. Like you can just point at anyone, any who I can't think of the guy who did all those Mike Meyer basically improv movies. His name is like there's a million of them, and I
Mhm.
can't think of one like I can't think of. I'm looking back to see. I can't think of like maybe one who I'm like every time they make something, like watch anything by Steve Martin. It's the same, especially like that early stuff. You know, the Jerk is sort of a master class in
Yeah.
doing dumb comedy in a way that's not dumb though. You know,
Yeah.
so all those things like that's what like so you want to kind of have like you want to kind of go from Marx Brothers to like peak Steve Martin and then like some Woody Allen minus all the gross stuff. You know what? And like that's what I like all of it. If you show me a dumb comedy, like the Fairley Brothers are dumb, but they're also smart. Like they're dumb smart movies.
Yeah.
Um, there's it's all. I don't think there's one. I'd have to really think about it. I could be like, this is the answer. You're doing something funny. It's very much my policy is to cover as much ground as possible. And I don't know if that's always successful, but that's the intent.
And so let's jump into your new stuff because, like you said, it's a little bit of
Yeah.
a departure of
Hmm.
like what I've read of your stuff. You know, it's horror.
Yes.
So why of
So,
like all the stuff to do like of all the genres rather?
yeah.
What was horror? What appealed to you the most about doing horror going from the
Yeah.
comedy?
Well, as an adult, I've really fallen in love with horror. But the answer there's sort of a two-part answer to that. One, as I said, comedy I think is a bad word. So few people do it well. I can't imagine like someone reading Public Domain in 2022 and not being like, this is funny, or reading 8 Billion Genies and being like, this is really good, or anything those guys do. Um, but it's not for everybody. And I didn't do Sex Criminals. You know what I mean? Like I don't have the Charles Soule machine. So my numbers, the people reading my book, it's 4,000. You know, we're talking about a 4,000 per. I want it to be more than that. I don't 5,000 even, right? And a couple editors were like, don't do comedy. Like if you want more people to read your stuff, don't read comedy. And even Kirkman was like, do this next book, but don't do comedy. And they're right. I mean, they were right. Like I want more readers. Like it's not it. That's the truth. Like either I'm doing this sort of organic, slowly grow thing, and so this is during the pandemic. So I'm mentally in a great place, right? Like as everybody was, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this horror book. I'm not gonna do comedy. Here's the thing about saying so here why horror. So here's the thing about horror. One, at this time I was really into horror movies. I watch a lot of bad horror movies that are like bad action movies. If they're bad, they're still probably okay. Bad
Mhm.
comedy is bad. Like there's no saving that. But a bad horror movie, it's probably still kind of fun to watch.
Yeah.
Um, the thing with horror is that horror and comedy are basically the same. They both use the same tricks in comics, which is pacing and setup and payoff. But the payoff is a murder and not a punchline. They're very similar. They both exist to elicit reactions and emotions, and I like that. And because I felt like I believe I can do horror as well as I do comedy because I understand pacing and the beats and I understand setting up these things because that's all it is. Um, and so yeah, I'm like I'm gonna do a horror book. I actually had just done Old Head, which is horror adjacent. It's got monsters in it, so to me, it's horror. That's all you need. It's just a monster and then it's horror. Um, and yeah, the thing is like it's also though it was not intentional, like my intent was not, is that it's also a great time to be doing horror in comics because it's became this sort of like validated third option, right? To like superheroes, what I call a thriller, like they kind of always do okay. And
Mhm.
now horror, like people will try a horror book, right? And that's not why I did it, but it's like I love it because it's like I love horror and I'm stoked to write it. I'm doing a lot of horror. Um, so I hate this place, and the response to it, I think we sold like 30 something thousand number one, which is dope. Like
Oh
people are reading
wow.
my books. Um, and I was like, some people are like, that's still really funny, and I'm like, man, it's good, I guess. Like I'm not writing it to be funny. I'm writing it to be charming because I think you want to like these characters. Like if you don't like the characters, who cares that they're in danger? So I'm writing these charming characters. Now I think maybe I lean into it a little bit more. Like maybe I'm like, well, it can be a little funnier than I intended, but I'm still not writing a comedy. I just can't help myself. I just like there's a point in the story where it's like here's this like a transitional spot and it needs to be filled, and I'm like, well, I love a joke.
Yeah.
I just get like that's just how I do stories. And I was trying to like put something scary in that spot, and I'm like, what if they just say something nice to each other though? Wouldn't that be great? So yeah, so that's why I did. I hate this place, and I'm like, man, I love writing horror. I really like this other thing. And I had the idea for Where Monsters Lie, which is with Dark Horse. That's especially that first issue is very much a horror comedy. By the end, it is not a horror comedy. Um, and that's again just how I write. I want people to like things. And how do I make people like things? It's like, well, they're funny and they're charming and you want to spend time with them. And that's just my first issues. Like all I think that says like all first issues are going to be a little bit funny. Where Monsters Lie, I think, is very funny. And I'm doing more. I have a bunch of pitches that I'm waiting to start on that are horror related or horror adjacent. I would love to do so. I have a pitch approved. I can't talk about any of this stuff, of course, because that's not where it's not going to be funny at all. Like, will there probably be? Probably, because I can't help myself. But to me, I'm like, this is 100% dead serious horror, and it probably won't be by the time I get to it because there's just the way that you're comfortable writing, and I don't want it to lose my voice. You know what I mean? I want everything to have my voice to it. So, yeah, that's how horror happened. I mean, I like horror movies. I assume I like everything. Like, if I probably don't want to watch like a historical drama, I'm not. I probably don't want to watch like a non rom-com romance movie. I probably don't. I'm too old for high art. I just want to be entertained. It's like because of that, like I'm only making things to me that are with the intended purpose to entertain, right? So yeah, that's why I'm doing horror. And it's funny because like I was like, I'm not gonna do I was like, comedy's bad. I want more readers. And the pandemic happened and I'm writing this book. And I'm like, you know what? If my legacy is I make 4,000 people happy for 40 minutes, that's my legacy in my life. That's pretty good. So I'm like, I'll still do comedy. I'm not gonna step too far away from it.
Yeah.
But I don't want like I think Comedy Guy has probably hurt in different ways in terms of sales. So like we didn't promote Where Monsters Lie as a comedy, even though it's pretty funny. And I think because of that, a lot more people bought it. And then they're like, oh, this is good. That they wouldn't have bought it. Someone's like, oh, it's really funny. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to step away because I think, and it's true even for Sex Castle or any Rocky Mountain, like they're funny, but it's like they're more than that. They're also these action epics and like they're these character dramas. I think the best things have everything in them. They have mysteries, they have drama, and that's what I'm making. And it's like I get that they're more funny, like they're unique because they're funny. But I don't like if you don't like funny things. Well, I don't understand that. First of all, I don't know. But it's like if you don't want to be amused at any point in your day, then it's not for you. But I think they're really entertaining and probably leaning into comedy as a sales part of it hurts.
It's
So
weird to
yeah.
me.
Anyway,
That's weird
yeah,
to me because I love comedy, you know,
yeah, but
but I
it's
get it.
comics.
I
Think about
understand.
how many Marvel big two, how many big two things that were supposed to be funny that you read and you're like, and because they were like, look, check out this hilarious new, and it's like it's not funny. Like, why am I reading it? Like you told me it was funny, and I get that, and I think my stuff is funny. I think you could be like, I think 7 out of 10 people would be like, that's funny. Like even if
Yeah.
they like, that's funny. You know what I
I
mean?
mean, I think it's a certain type of writer, though. I don't think you can't. You have to have.
Yes.
You have to have it in you. Like, not
Yeah.
everybody can write comedy. You can try to write comedy, but then it comes off corny as hell, and you're like, "That was dumb." Like, I can't
Yeah.
believe they tried to get away with that. You know?
There's a conversation that comes around pretty often about how like how like how like Sandler's doing dramatic roles are like Jordan Peele. Is that right? I always feel like I say his name wrong. Nope and Us and
Yeah.
Get
Get
Out.
out.
Like how like oh look this full on comedian, like look why are they making such great, why are they able to do these great dramatic roles, but you never see. It's really hard for someone who's like a pure thespian to do comedy because it's just a different gig. Comedians, people who do that are their whole thing is like how do emotions work and how do you elicit these responses. So to sort of transition to other things, I think it's just you understand like this is the sequence of events to get a reaction, like this is the sequence of events to get a reaction, as opposed to like look at their surrealistic performance, look at how they recreate like this. So I think that's what like yeah, comedies, it's comedians can do anything. I'm doing air quotes. I don't know if I think this is a visual, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like comedians can do anything. It's hard for other people to do comedy, and because it's just like it's different set of tools. I think that's why comedians, it's also horror's always funny. Like comedy
I
and
always
horror
think
is
it's
such a.
funny. Yeah.
But there's all like even just like there's a place. Horror has a place. It's like one. I think it's sort of like it's like a palate cleanser for all the terrible things that happen. But like uh uh oh, what's the word, like comedy characters, like sort of comedic relief characters are
Yeah.
always in horror. There's always a bit for a bad pun. Horror has a place for it. So also like that's the transition. Like what's the transition? It's like it's the opposite side of this coin of this thing that I like. I love action, and horror still has action in it, right? Like it's a big part of it. So it's just like a natural transition. But it's like you can go one way, not the other, because I like you have to. Comedy takes it. There's probably some instinct that's required. I don't know if that's true or not, but you have to understand like all the bits, like the pacing and how to set up a moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard. I think you can only go one way. I think you could probably go the other way, but I think you have to sort of come out wanting to entertain people uh to do it that way.
Yeah, no, like I said, like I love comedy. I love humor in comics. I think it's something that I don't see enough of, and you definitely do it well. But
Thanks,
you do
man.
have your moments in this book. But this book, like
Yeah,
I don't, I'm ashamed to say it, but I missed it on when it was coming in single issues. But my buddy was like, "You have to read this book," and
yeah,
I was like, "All right," I didn't even know this came out, so I read it. And first of all, first issues to me, you either hit it or you miss it. Like it's it.
sure.
There's no like middle ground for me. You know, it's either done well or it's not. This one pulled me in. I read it in one sitting, and I just absolutely fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the concept. You know, Gabby and Trudy and inheriting a house that they have to live and they can't leave, like they're stuck
Yeah.
with all this like supernatural like mayhem and stuff like just happening. So where did the concept for this book kind of come into play? You said it was during the pandemic you wrote this, right?
I got the gig during the pandemic. And so it's funny, like I can't remember the last time I did New York Comic Con. I think it was is either 2020, it must have been 2019. It wasn't the year of the pandemic. And on my way there, I was listening because I'm way into horror. Like I'm feeling horror so hard, and I was listening to a lot of horror podcasts. And I heard about Skinwalker Ranch, which I think now everyone knows about Skinwalker Ranch. It's kind of ubiquitous. Have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch before?
No.
All right, so I hadn't either. I never heard of it, but now there's like a Discovery show where they go to this ranch. It's a real place, air quotes again. So I was like, here's the deal with Skinwalker Ranch is that it has everything on it. It has UFOs, it has monsters in the woods, it has these sort of like Native American witch doctor assassins. Um, it's haunted. There's poltergeists. There's Bigfoots. And I'm listening to this guy. The guy. There's a I think one of the guys who worked on like Coast to Coast wrote a book about it. I think it was George North. I think someone's gonna be like he's wrong, but listen, it's been 3 years. I can only do so much. He wrote this book about it, and then everyone started talking about it because the book's pretty good. And I'm listening to this, and I'm like, that's crazy. I'd never heard of a place that has everything. Like usually it's like you may be haunted and there might be something scarier. You know what I mean? But it's like it's
Mhm.
never like also there's a Bigfoot. I'm like, I'm like, why hasn't anyone made a book? Like, why isn't there any movie or a book or nothing? Like this seems like great. All the paranormal stuff together, all the supernatural stuff, all the horror stuff. And so at that show, Robert Kirkman's always very kind. He always comes and talks to me. He's a good Midwest boy like me. And I was like, hey, I heard this place. I think it could be an interesting setting. Not the settings don't matter, characters don't matter, stories what matters. But I'm like, when this is interesting, right? So I'm like, have you heard about this place before? And he's like, that's great, you should do it. And I'm like, I didn't. I'm like, it's just a place, man. And
Yeah.
during the pandemic, I was like, hey, I would love to do. I need some work because there's not conventions anymore. And he's like, oh, do that thing you pitched me. And I'm like, I didn't pitch you anything. So Skinwalker Ranch was, I mean, like, full on. There's no like, it's the same idea. But for me, I'm like, you know what's interesting about this is if I because I get to make my own, is I can do any genre of horror I want here. I can do any genre. I can do every genre. There's no genre that I can't do on this ranch. I mean, so the story is Gabby and Trudy inherit this ranch, and the ranch has it's a paranormal nexus. There's ghosts, there's monsters in the woods, there's some sort of dark entity, there's lights in the sky, there's a poltergeist. And right out the gate, like I introduced basically a slasher element because I was like, I want to do all these genres because I love horror. And the great thing about horror is like action. Action's full of tropes. The genre horror is full of tropes. It's full of genres, and I love playing with those. I love playing with those so much. So that was where the idea came. And then, like I said, it's well, what's the story? And the story is more important to me than anything. And that's what the ride is. The ride is like now we're in the story, which is uh basically these two girls are trying to figure out how to fix it. Like how do you make it so it's not haunted anymore? How can you get out? How can we get away from, how can we leave? Because they can't even leave without bad things happening when they leave. Um and so I'm like, well, that's really interesting to me. If like of what my fears are, which are two parts. So Trudy is sort of like a doomsday prepper. She's a survivalist, and Gabby is like a sort of a perpetual optimist. And for me, I thought, well, if you're a doomsday prepper, what's like the worst thing that could happen is to be in a situation where there's no solution, there's no step by step, there's no, and that freaks me out. Like we now live in a time where it's like if my washer breaks, I can Google my washer and get a YouTube video and probably how to fix it, right? But there's no YouTube video for how you deal with monsters in the woods. There's no solution to it. And if your entire life is built being prepared for the worst case scenario, whatever that is, no more water, right? Civil war, whatever, and then you have to deal with murder ghosts. Like what a nightmare, right? And that same part, this stuff is scarier to me than anything I put in those woods. Is to be brought into a situation or to bring into a situation my loved ones who are in danger. My loved ones being in danger, and these two love each other so much, they're always in danger. They're both are in danger all the time. Like that's so terrifying to me. More terrifying than who's the horned man or why are there lights in the sky. So yeah, that was sort of the whole basis for it. That's the premise. I love it. I wish I was doing 50 issues of it. I'm not doing 50 issues. I wish I was doing 50 issues of it though.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask. Like, what are your plans moving forward? Like, how far out or how long do you see the series going? Because this obviously is just a volume 1.
Yeah.
I mean, there is room to kind of build out on terms of like the past. I mean, you could, what I mean? Like,
no,
stuff like that.
mean, I could do this. I could literally have done this book for 50 issues. I wanted 15. 15 is what I wanted because here's the thing, man. The state of comics in 2023 to do more than 4 issues is tough. All the publishers, it used to be 6 issues. You could do 6 issues and you'd be fine. Now we're moving towards 4 issues.
Wow.
Because of trade waiting and because those 5th and 6th issues just don't sell well. Because at that point, you're like, many people are like, I'll just buy the trade. And otherwise, you're kind of relying on variant sales. And if you're not a big selling book, you're not selling variants because they're not collectible, right? So I would argue maybe they're more collectible because there's fewer of them. I don't understand that part. That's fine. So, it's getting harder and harder. This book sold really well. So Skybound was like, we might not be able to do 15. And I'm like, well, then we'll just stop at 10. And I don't think that's been announced. And I don't think I'm supposed to say anything about it, but it's going to be 10 issues. I got to do the ending I wanted because I always had an ending. It's a little bit rushed. I would have liked to meander a little bit and play more. And certainly just the nature of the place, like one could always return. But I'm very much a beginning, middle, and end guy. It's very important to me that stories have all of those, which is why it's challenging to envision sort of doing Spider-Man for 20 issues, to do anything for 20 issues, but especially something where I can't kill anybody, where no one can die and bad things happen to the next person.
Yeah.
It's tough for me to imagine just how to do the emotional stakes for that long. So we just started the second arc. Issue 6 came out the beginning of this month. It's going to be 5 issues, and that'll be the end of it, as far as I'm concerned, for now. If they make a movie or a TV show, we'll be right back on Rutherford Ranch. But sales are what they are. And not that the sales are bad, but I don't know, they didn't want to commit to it. And I've always had an ending. I've always had an ending that I like. Whether or not readers will like it, I'm very interested to find out. I hope they do. I hope they like the ending because I like the ending a lot because it sort of explains why the ranch is the way it is. And there's sort of a resolution. I like it a lot. I'm really interested to see what the readers think, especially like because these first 2, issue 6 and issue 7, sort of you find out a little bit more about Trudy's past, why she's the way she is. Her murderous cult doomsday prepper family shows up. So I do kind of a home invasion thing for a couple of issues. And that's another trope I really love. And one of the things I lean into is like I think humans are worse than anything else, and that's a big part of this book. Itchy, who was the hitman slasher in the first one, is worse than any monster, right? Mm-hmm. And in this one, like Trudy's dad, he's worse than Itchy. He's worse than any monster. But yeah, we're gonna do we'll have an ending. It's gonna be this. So I guess jump on now for the end. But I'm proud of it. I'm real proud of this. The scripts are good. Artyom's doing good work, and so far people are stoked it's back, which is what I think because it's a great book. The characters are likable. I really love Gabby and Trudy. I don't think there's a character in that I've put in any of these this run of I Hate This Place, even the side characters that I don't sincerely sort of really like. And that's not that that's not the case, but it's kind of surprised like I was kind of surprised, like, wow, I really like Big Mike a lot. Like, Big Mike doesn't do anything; he just works on the ranch. But it's like I love it when Big Mike shows up.
Yeah.
And I had bigger plans for him and Garth, like who's the ranch. Like I had bigger plans for those guys if we had gone 15 issues. But that's right. That's how writing is. Circumstances always happen where you might lose something. For Assassination, I had a whole character arc because I thought I had more pages per issue than I ended up having. Like a whole character arc is just gone, and the book's it's not weaker. It's a good book, but it's like in my head, I'm like, I wish that was in there. And I wish that, but Mike and Garth get some moments that I think are pretty good in this last 5 issues.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to read the. I wish I too would kind of wish it was longer, but I'm definitely
Yeah.
excited to read the next run, dude. But in terms of any other projects, then if you're, I mean, I'm sure you're probably either close to being done with the scripts or like wrapping it up, I would imagine. But are you working on anything else that you can talk about?
So, so not that. So I just finished the last script for Peacemaker, which is a 6 issue series coming out May 1st from DC. It's very much if I my thing, just like Rick and Morty, was I want to give people more of the thing they like because I like it. So it's very much in line with the Peacemaker TV show or the Peacemaker from the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie. So if you like those things, I think you'll like it a lot. I think it's really good. I do the same shtick. He's a big, fun, dumb guy. There's heartstrings being pulled, my guy, because that's what I'm trying to do. Um, I'm done writing Where Monsters Lie. Issue 3 comes out April 1st, I think. I don't know. There's 5 weeks in May, but I know Where Monsters Lie and I Hate This Place come out on the same day for the next 2 months. So the next 2 months are still going to be like double Kyle Wednesday on whatever day that is. I'm real proud of that. I'm hopeful to do another arc of that. I think if you love horror movies, it's about a gated community for slasher villains. It's where sort of your slasher monsters go in between their movie murder sprees, and then sort of a survivor shows up who's basically if Batman's parents were killed by Michael Myers, he spent his whole life sort of growing into the special agent to fight these slasher monsters, and he finds them. So the end of issue 1 is like, well, what's going to happen now? Like the police are here. So if you and it's all tropes, like it's all you'll be like, I recognize that, like I recognize the idea of this character because I'm not doing satire and I'm not doing spoofs, right? Um, I'm playing with tropes, but it's very much it'll feel very familiar. I have a bunch of stuff that's either I'm just started on or I'm literally waiting for the green light, which is the most frustrating part of being sort of a freelance creator. Is I think I have 3 pitches that have been approved and I'm just waiting for them to figure out who can they afford to be an artist, how many issues it's going to be, and it's like I'd love to go. I'd love to go right now. I'm writing a secret series for Marvel that I'm turning in the first script today. The
Nice.
Peacemaker thing's gonna be real interesting because I suspect if it's as good as I think it is, as DC thinks it is, then there'll be a lot of like I did another little tiny like anthology thing for DC, which I'm stoked about. I'm doing with Chris Schweitzer. But yeah, like nothing's been announced. I'm waiting to start on things. Like I'm in a weird transitional period. And normally when I'm in these transitional periods, I like to do an old head or I like to do a sex castle or I like to do one of these books. But it's like I'm worried if I start, they're gonna be like, go on those three pitches. And those pitches have artists involved and like they need paychecks. So it's like I have to get them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can't sort of be dilly-dallying around. So I'm kind of waiting, but it's a good time because I'm doing 3 conventions this month. This weekend I'll be in Northern Kentucky for Highland Heights Con. Next week I'm doing Lexington Toy and Comic Show in Lexington, Kentucky, which is a great show. It's a great Midwest regional show. One is I think that and C2E2 are the 2 best ones. They do a good job, and it's always they take really good care of us creators. So it's always great to go to. And then I'm doing C2E2 in Chicago, which of course is the biggest boy here in the Midwest. So I am busy this month, but man, I'd love to be writing right now. I mean, I like drawing. I like doing my stuff. It's the happiest I am. But you know, other people drawing sells more issues than I draw, so I get it. But yeah, I'm hoping to be working soon. This Marvel thing I think is interesting. It'll keep me a little bit busy, but I wish I was doing 2 or 3 things instead of sort of waiting to start 2 or 3 things. And it's funny because it used to be I I don't want that. I want to do one book and be done. One book and be done. That way it gets my whole attention and I live in it. And now it's like Yeah, but I'd like to have like a couple other things just so I know like there's money. So I'd rather
Yeah,
be
yeah.
sort of juggling. I'd rather be juggling now than I'm not. And I'm not. I'm kind of annoyed by it. But it's like you told me that 2 years ago, I'd be like, you don't want that, dude. I'm like, I don't want that, but now I kind of want it for the security of it. So yeah, nothing. That's where monsters lie. I hate this place. Is there anything else that just came out? Old Head came out a while ago, I guess. What else you got? That's it for right now.
Yeah,
I'm doing a lot of pitches.
I got a whole list of stuff. Where Monsters Lie, I missed out on that too, so I'm definitely gonna have to go
Yeah,
get
hit your
those
store up.
issues.
If you like horror, I mean, I like. I hate this place is a great horror yarn, but if you're the type of person who's just like, I love horror. I have a Freddy glove. I love those. I really do like slasher movies. They're kind of my favorite ones because they're like action movies, and I just like they're chasing. You know what I mean? Like I just love a slasher movie, and I sort of became fixated on like where do they go between these movies? Like what do they do? Like Chucky's somewhere watching. He's not. He can't go to the grocery. You know what I mean? Like he's watching cable somewhere. Who's paying for the cable? Where's is Michael Myers just standing in the woods? All like where do they go? Like who's building Jigsaw's traps? He's not building them. You never see a blueprint or a screwdriver in the background, right? He can't
Yeah.
get some local contractor. I'm like, who's doing this? So that was sort of the premise, and the idea is like these guys. There's sort of these gated communities for them to go, and there's people who go and get food for them, and there's people who like help them design their traps. And when they get shot at the end of a movie, they sort of pull them out. I was trying like all these logistics and like how do they relate to each other? I mean, like surely like they're also like even though Jigsaw, he's fascinated with all that murder, but like surely he loves a soap opera or something too. Like he loves a good book. He's like, man, I love Elmore Leonard books or something. I don't know, but I'm like
Mhm.
these guys are still real people, most of them, even though they're psychopathic slasher killers. And I think again, I think that's a really interesting setting for all these characters and how do they sort of domestically interact? But again, that's not the story. What's the story? What happens when the good guy shows up and he's wants revenge and maybe he's not the good guy anymore. Maybe in this book the good guy's actually the bad guy. Like who's the bad guy here? And that's what I became really interested in. Where Monsters Lie issue 2 just came out. It's a 4 issue. It's 4 issues, so you're at the halfway point. Um, and that's another one. That's another first issue I'm extremely proud of because what you said is true. First issues matter. They and expectations I think matter too. But like
Mhm.
first issue, I think I always try to get better. I always try to get better, and I'm at a stage where I'm like, this first issue needs to be a banger. But also, I'm very much into not cliffhangers, but an ending that makes you want to see the next thing. If you read like Rock Candy Mountain or anything earlier I did, I like to end issues with sort of here's what's happening next. Assassination does it a lot. Six Sidekicks does it less. Where it's like, here's what's happening next. You better come back, y'all, and see what happens when the assassins fight more assassins. But I'm trying very much now to sort of do endings where you go, well, what's next? Or like that was cool. What happens because of that? I want to see what happens. So it's all these growths. So first issues and sort of issue endings are my current focus. Um, I suspect the next thing is going to be how do you write 10 issues with a superhero that can't die will be my next sort of thing I need to figure out. But first issues are good. I think Where Monsters Lie and I think I Hate This Place is a banger. I remember when I Hate This Place came out, people were like, well, he kind of threw everything in. I think it's like the whole kitchen sink, like everything's in there. What can you possibly do now? And in my head, I'm like, that's not all of it. Like, there's so much more stuff.
Yeah.
This is just exposition, guys. Like, I'm just setting you up for what I'm doing next. So that's dope because I think it's a really good issue. I think Peacemaker #1 is a banger. I think it's I actually just read issue 2. I shouldn't talk shit, but I was like issue 2. I'm like, man, not quite as strong as issue 1. Not quite as strong, but I know by the time I get to 6, I know 5 and 6 are 4, 5, and 6 are great. I don't remember 3 because I wrote it a long time ago. But I think Peacemaker #1, people are gonna be like, this is dope. This is so good. I'm really leaning into issue 1s, and I think Where Monsters Lie has a really good one. So Hard Wreck, if you like the horror, um, and Old Head's an OGN. It's horror too, but it's horror adjacent. There's monsters in it. There's bad monsters in it.
Yeah, dude, I'm gonna check all this stuff out, and I
Yeah,
Peacemaker definitely gonna be checking that out. I'm excited to check out Where Monsters Lie as well, and the end of I Hate This Place. Super stoked for all that stuff, dude. I want to check out
yeah.
some of your
Thanks, man.
earlier stuff as well. And for everybody listening and watching, can you quickly just share where they can find you online, if you have online store or anything like that, and I'll drop all the links down below.
Yeah, of course. I am at the Kyle Starks on all of them. I think. I think on all the social medias. I have a website which is kylestarks.com. I saw some stuff. Buy it from your store, guys. Like, I do want your money. Don't get me wrong, but buy the book from your stores. It looks better for us, unless you want it signed so badly and you're not going to be at any spot I'm going to be at. Obviously, I get that, but stores are trying to make money, and it looks good for me when I sell something in a store. Um, and I do a Patreon. I have a Patreon, which I think is just patreon.com/Kyle Starks, where I do a sticker club where for $5, no matter where you are in whatever country, for $5, I send out 2 stickers. They are whatever they're themed, whatever dumb thing I want to do. Last month was bad 90s stuff where I did Sleepwalker and Darkhawk. This month is because it's WrestleMania season. I'm doing Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn. Next month is Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson. It's whatever. The Patreon I have people vote. Like, generally when I don't have something I want to do, I'm like, what do you guys want to see? So Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson won, and I think like probably the next 2 months after. I usually don't know 5 months in advance, but for this case, it's going to be Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which is awesome. If you don't know Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, that's a great spoofy horror show. I think it's on Peacock or Hulu. It was on Hulu. And then I'm doing Shaun of the Dead because that's what the votes for. And I'm like, I love those things. Let's do them. Yeah. So yeah, I got stuff going on. I'm the Kyle Starks everywhere. We're always talking about what's coming out. We're always talking about something stupid for sure.
Right on, dude. Well, I want to thank you again, and can't wait to see all the new stuff. And for everybody listening, watching, also go pick up I Hate This Place Volume 1 at your shops now. And the new arc just started as well early this month, so you can get the trade, get the new issue, so you're all caught up. And Kyle, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me, dude. I definitely want to do this with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be glad to come back, man.
Right,
Just get back at me. I'm glad to be here. It's nice to talk to people. It's nice to be wanted and desired. So
awesome, dude. Thank you.
thanks, bud.